I've had this thing on my top shelf for a while, where it deserves to sit, so let's start off the year with a $900 treat that is the Keycult No.2 Rev.1 in the brass wind key variant. This build was made possible by keyboardtreehouse.com, I'll chuck a link in the description, and the package was previously opened by them, which we can see. First of all, absolutely stunning packaging, by far the most premium I've personally come across for keyboards. No explanation needed, you can just see it for yourself. And in this box, we basically get just the keyboard enclosure, which we'll take apart soon, and everything else is in another box. The approach is a little weird, like the rest of the stuff is just in a standard whatever box, but from a completed keyboard standpoint, I guess it does make sense, as you can chuck the finished keyboard back in the box and it's all good. And some of this extra stuff was packed by Eric from Keyboard Treehouse, so we have some oiled 58.5 gram punchy springs, Cristo MCG 111 lube, Halo True and clear stems, and OG Invir Panda key switches. In the envelope we get a warning about cleaning brass parts, a sweet looking Keycult sticker, this amazing card that identifies the keyboard, awesome design, and just small things like this makes a huge difference, and a thank you card. Perhaps my only complaint was this black packet. At first I thought it was some random mystery item thing, but it was just some screws and the Allen keys. It was a pain to get the stuff out and I couldn't see what was inside. Nitpicky, but true. And finally we get the brass plate and the PCB. Let's go back to the case and take it apart. It is quite different to anything I've personally built. Using the included hex screw, we can remove the 8 screws from the top, and that releases the brass bottom piece. Because of the design, the brass piece only has 2 rubber feet, so be careful with that. And then on the bottom of the aluminium pieces, there's another 8 hex screws to remove. So as we can see, there's 3 main parts to the case, and this creates a seamless design which we'll look at later. So essentially the brass piece is kind of like a cover for the bottom. Here's the top aluminium piece, very clean overall. Something we hardly ever see is that 2 of the rubber feet are on here, and apparently this is the only unit not to ship with the gaskets already installed, which is cool for the videos so we can see more of what's going on. So typically the gaskets do come factory installed. Here's what I would call the mounting base, also made from aluminium. Good chunky piece, and again we see those spots for the gaskets to go into. We have the cable channel for the USB port, and a nice No.2 engraving, even though we'll pretty much never see it, but it's these touches that makes it special. And if we turn it over, we have this. Again, very interesting. I don't know the exact reasoning behind this design besides the fact that it pairs with a brass piece. The finish isn't perfect here, which is to be expected, and it legit doesn't matter at all since it makes a perfect fit with the brass. Now this is substantial. It may not look thick to you because it's so big, but it is, and packs an absolute punch at 1.8 kilograms. For reference, something like the Ducky 1.2 Mini or An Pro are like 600 or 700 grams, and a typical full-size retail mech is about 1.1 or 1.2 kilograms, so yeah, crazy. Here's the 1.5mm brass plate, a bunch going on here to promote flex while keeping the brass. So we can see that we have some flex cuts between the clusters, and that just relieves the plate a little bit. And to add to that, we have these things along the top and bottom. This is what we refer to as a leaf spring design, and you can see how it works. It's just cut to make these points more flexible, and that's what will be sandwiched between the gasket mounts. So I actually did build this before I got the gaskets, so I couldn't finish it, and I messed up the bottom row, and it was filmed in 1080p. Switches were super tight to put in, so I put them into the plate first before the PCB and then soldered them in place. But yeah, since the OG Nvidia Pandas came with sockets, my life was spared, and I was able to take them all out without any desoldering. So now we're back to this stage. We used Durox stabilizers. Unfortunately, there was only a 6.25U wire, which is a standard size, but we wanted a 1.5, 1.5U bottom row, so I had to use some random 7U wire I had, and I of course lubed them with dielectric grease. The PCB was designed by the ever dependable Wilbur. It is a little dirty with flux since I already soldered switches to it, but it's a beautiful piece of kit, and we can see the sockets that saved me. Since the tiny plastic pieces that made the switches so difficult to get in are now broken off from building previously, they were a breeze to put into place. I didn't show the switch modding since I personally hate it being so time consuming, but as shown before, we have the original Nvidia Panda housings, and we removed the original linear stems and put in Halo True and Clear stems, which create the very popular Holy Panda tactile key switch. To add to that, I lubed them with Crystal MCG11 and spring swapped with 58.5 gram punchy springs which were oiled, and you gotta do these things with such a premium board to get the best out of it. And now to put it all back together. I kind of went in blind so that I would experience what buyers experience, so the building process was a little confusing, and it took me a bit to figure it out because of its unique design. And after some messing around, this is the real order. First of all, have the USB-C port screwed in, and then we have to put in the 8 hex screws without screwing them in to the aluminium base, and then the plate just sits on top of the gaskets. Then we put the top alu piece on and screw it in from the bottom, while also trying to align the plate because it doesn't screw into anything as it is gasket mounted. I just did it by eye in trying to make the empty space even around the edges. There's a lot of wiggle room, so you do have to make sure you get it aligned nicely and then screw it down when happy. Again, minimal preparation, so I don't know if there was a better or real way of doing this, but it worked out. And finally, we can put in the brass piece, and we have access to those loosely placed screws through the top of the plate. And that's where I was going wrong, since you can't put the screws through the plate holes. My alignment wasn't perfect, perhaps a little too skewed to the left and a tiny bit on an angle. And to finish it off, we have GMK waves courtesy of my mate Jono. And here it is, a very classy looking 10 keyless keyboard. As I hinted before, this is a super premium kit coming in at 900 USD, and that's without the switches, keycap stabilizers, so yeah, like top tier stuff, but that's what it's supposed to be, as they set out to create a no compromise keyboard worthy of the elusive endgame name. There's a few versions of the No.2, perhaps the most traditional looking one is this being the WinKey version in dark grey, and it's the subtleties in its aesthetic design that really do appeal to me. So from a top down view, it's as simple as you will see. The top and bottom bezels are quite sizable, with the sides being slim. The corners are very slightly rounded, and the edges are all softened with a minimal fillet which gives it a sort of soft feel. But then it starts to show its character. As said before, this is a seamless design, so there's no seam or separation visible between the pieces, besides the rear. And this creates a really clean look, and instead of having a seam, we have this very gentle line that gives it a bit of angle and shape, and breaks up what would otherwise just be a straight wall. Just that line is so subtle in its aesthetic and physical feel, but makes a huge difference. We're getting a bit deeper here, but design is about how these things make you feel, and just that line gives a sense of ease and calmness, whereas a wall that goes straight down is more substantial, confronting, and stronger. It is still very substantial though, with an 8.5 degree typing angle, which is a little higher than say a typical 6-degree angle, and with no cuts or anything on the sides, it does look very full, and it's definitely one of the harder keyboards to pick up, especially since it's so heavy. On the rear, the brass piece comes up to the USB Type-C port, again very clean and soft. And this brass piece, really interesting design, and allows the keyboard to have 0 screws visible, nothing on top, nothing on bottom. And from here, you can't even tell how thick or thin it is. The sandblasted brass finish is immaculate and is finished with a laser etched Keycult logo, straight up just so beautiful. There has also been a red anodized aluminium based version and the stunning stainless steel version, which is on another level. And all of this put together makes for an extremely solid keyboard and, more importantly, heavy. I measured mine to be just over 4 kilograms, that's crazy for a 10 keyless keyboard. Of course it's not practical. Terrible for portability. Even moving it on the desk is difficult, but that's not what it's for. This is an absolute beast on the desk, and even more so on the hands, and that's what you want and expect from a top tier keyboard. So that's aesthetics and build, but if it doesn't feel or sound good, it isn't complete. The No.2 goes all in. We have flex cuts in the brass plate, which also has a leaf spring design, which is then isolated and sandwiched between 16 gaskets. There's no real right or wrong in how a keyboard should feel, as it is personal preference, but the general tendency is to have a kind of softened bottom out so it isn't as harsh. As it is an isolated sandwich design, it's a very even typing experience, so there's no hard spots underneath that a typical tray mount design would give. Traditionally the middle would have the most flex, but because of the flex cuts and leaf spring design, it's actually the sides that depress quite a bit. But this is only by actually pressing it quite hard. In real use you'll have minimal flex. We have Holy Panda key switches installed, so a very tactile key switch, and on the harsh side by default. They also bottom out quite hard and loud because of this, so it is quite difficult to feel the subtleties of the design through typing, especially without a side-by-side comparison. But I guess the fact that all I can feel and think about are the key switches mean that the case design complements them in a good way. But it's definitely very, very enjoyable. Sorry that I can't give a proper informed opinion, but I'm not just gonna make stuff up purely based on its reputation. I just don't know. The keyboard sounds awesome. Again, Holy Pan is allowed even lubed, but there's no noticeable ping. For an MX style key switch, this is like peak tactile for me. The bump is right near the top, not the smoothest, but in all honesty, the bump eradicates the need for that. It may not be for everyone as the tactility is quite strong, but it's definitely something that you should try. It uses the WT80A PCB, so it is programmable via VIA. Incredibly easy to use, such a great tool. It recognizes your compatible keyboard immediately. You have several layers in which you can customize each key with whatever, and it updates instantly. And that's the Keycult No.2 Rev.1. I love so much about this keyboard. I love its unassuming look at first glance, but it's so much more than that. And that combination is what gets me. It's not screaming for attention with its classy, silky, smooth aesthetics, but when you actually get your hands on it, it blows you away with the build quality, the weight, and of course the typing experience. Obviously people are going to be shocked by the unbelievably high price tag, and that's fair. It's not for everyone, and it shouldn't be, but it's on another level. The fit and finish is superb, and it brings along innovation in how a keyboard is put together. So in my eyes, yes, it's definitely worthy of that elusive endgame tag, and will definitely keep its touch through the years to come.